Hi, this is Neil Lazarus, and welcome to another podcast. Today we're discussing Israel's controversial nation-state law. For those of you who follow me on Facebook and Twitter, you know I've been writing a little bit about the nation-state law. Often I don't express too many strong opinions, and very much try and reflect the arguments for and against. And again, what I'm going to try and do here today is summarize a little bit about the law and, tell you maybe what I think as well, just for those of you who were writing to me saying, Neil, what do you think? Especially in that voice. So seriously, though, is this law, which was passed on the 19th of July by the Israeli Knesset, and was passed by 62 votes, 55 against, 2 abstention. Why is it so dramatic? Is it's basically a basic law. So it's not just any piece of legislation. Basic law, that's the real thing. In other words, Israel doesn't have a written constitution as such, but rather it has a set of basic laws which were intended as a blueprint for a eventual constitution, but we don't have one. Reason why we don't have a constitution? Well, you're going to have to ask the ultra-Orthodox. The ultra-Orthodox in Israel very much oppose it. Why do you need a constitution if you have the Bible? It's going to define what it means to be a Jewish state, what would be a Jew. Let's try and avoid those and have some form of consensus. This nation-state law legalizes, codifies the meaning of a nation-state as a Jewish state. Now, the reality is a lot of it's not new. A lot of it we've already had. And let's go through some of it, just to understand what it was. By the way, if you want to actually read it, I put up a video summarizing the whole law on my Facebook page. You can check that out. So, first of all, basically, the law says what the name of the State of Israel is, i.e. it's the State of Israel. No big deal. It also defines its symbols and its calendar and its national anthem. What its national holidays are, that Sabbath would be the day off, law of return, all that stuff. Now, again, we know, I'm sure you're aware, that there are controversies already in that, in what already exists. For example, if the State of Israel is a democratic country, can it really have a national anthem which talks about the hope of Jews to return, the tikvah, the hope? What about the 20% of the Arab population here? But that aside, and the fact that the national holidays are Jewish, Sabbath is Jewish, and that's the day off. This law isn't new; it's just codifying it. It does go further in many ways, and let's outline some of the other issues it talks about, and in particular, changes as well. Jerusalem has been declared as the Jerusalem being, quote, the united capital of Israel. That already exists in the legislation, so that's nothing too new. Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people that has the right to self-determination. That is there. It's in the Declaration of Independence. The difference here is that the Declaration of Independence doesn't actually have legal standing as such. Here, this is a law which is saying it's a basic law of the State of Israel, so it has much more impetus. One of the more controversial parts of the law that was passed is the status of Arabic. Arabic was reduced from being an official language to one of, quote, a special language. Now, yes, we all know that they're all special. I'm special, you're special, and I'm sure that Arabic doesn't want to be a special language, but rather an official language of the State of Israel. The question that remains is whether that is actually going to be proving legal in the end, whether to change that status. Give you a spoiler alert, already people going to the Supreme Court of Israel to object to a lot of this law. Israel's relationship with the world Jewry has also been defined. In Clause 6, it says, quote, "The state shall act within the diaspora to strengthen the affinity between the state and members of the Jewish people." The words "within the diaspora" were added by ultra-Orthodox parties because they wanted to strengthen the affinity between Israel and the Jewish world. The question is, Jewish world, hold on. What Jewish world? Are we talking about the conservatives? Are we talking about reform? What does that mean for American Jewry? Look, we just had the situation where a conservative rabbi was arrested for conducting a wedding, which is, you're only meant to have Orthodox weddings here. Are they really going to be talking to everybody? Throw that question out to you. Want to know what you think? Send me a Twitter or tweet on Awesome Seminars, or you can be in contact with me via my Facebook page. I'm interested what you think about these podcasts, and definitely let me know. I know many people just email me via my website or otherwise interested to hear your views, and we'll read them next time. Another part of the legislation says Jewish settlement is a national value. Now, again, its exact quote was, let me find it here in the legislation, quote, "The state views the development of Jewish settlement as a national value and will act to encourage and promote its establishment and consolidation." Yeah, now that was argued over. Some people wanted, and the original version said, we want to have a clause which talked about the right of ethnic development, that a town could be just Jewish or just Arabic, and that should be enshrined within law. That was objected to, and we've talked about in the past the letter by the President of the State of Israel objecting to it. Now, one of the big questions that we need to find out is how the Supreme Court is going to deal with this. But that's maybe for another podcast. What is interesting is two things. One, I come back and saying it's a basic law rather than just any other law, and that's important to try and understand where it came from. Look, this act is very political, clearly so. First of all, in many ways, I think it comes from a response to rulings which have previously been given by the Supreme Court of Israel, which is notoriously liberal, which have often ruled in favor of democracy over the Jewish nature of the state. Since the creation of the State of Israel, there's always been a debate. Is Israel a Jewish democracy or a democratic Jewish state? And how do you do both? The reality is today, I think this legislation is pushing towards trying to be more of a Jewish state than necessarily a Jewish democratic state. And it's certainly seen as a backlash or a way of dealing with the Supreme Court of Israel. But the irony of the irony is that the Supreme Court of Israel may rule that this legislation is illegal. Now, supporters of this bill are saying, hey, if you disagree with it, you're disagreeing with the Zionist principles of the State of Israel. And I think in many ways that this political piece of legislation very much suits Netanyahu and his government at the moment. Because if you look at what he's saying, he's positioning himself as saying, look, who are the people who are opposing it? The left in Israel, the new post-Zionists in Israel, those people who don't see that Israel belongs to Am Yisrael and the people of Israel. Well, with respect, that's not quite the case. First of all, one of the biggest contendants, shall I try that again in English? One of the biggest people and groups of people which have opposed it are the Druze. In recent weeks, the Druze have been up in arms against this piece of legislation, and rightly, I would argue rightly so. And I want to read to you a little bit from a letter from a Druze officer who wrote to the Prime Minister and then was suspended for writing to the Prime Minister, and his name is Captain Amir Jamal. Captain Amir Jamal wrote a letter to the Prime Minister decrying the nationality law, and posted it on Facebook, and was suspended for 14 days. There's no room for any kind of political discourse in the IDF, said his commanders. Now, this whole article was published on Ynet. I've got a link of it on my Facebook. You can read the whole thing if you like. But let's read a little bit from his letter. He says, quote, there is no room for any... His officers said that there's no room for political discourse. The reality is, if you're asking minorities to serve in the army, they've got to be bought into the state of Israel. Druze are loyal citizens. They are loyal citizens of the state of Israel. We've got commanders. They've been leaders in the war, for example, within Lebanon. They are more loyal than the loyal. In his letter, he said... The soldier said, quote, Mr. Prime Minister, I have sat by myself, and after many thoughts that have gone through my head, I have decided to express my opinion about the nationality law that you and Knesset members have implemented. He said, this morning when I woke up to drive to the base, I asked myself why. Why should I serve the state of Israel and the state that I and my two brothers and my father served with devotion, a sense of mission and with love of our homeland, when in the end, what do we get? To be second-class citizens, to continue to serve the country. I don't want to continue, and I'm sure that hundreds more people who stopped serving and asked to be discharged from the IDF due to your decision, Netanyahu, yours and your government, the officer continued. Now, it's not only soldiers who are Druze. We also have diplomats who are Druze. We have many, many high officials. These guys are very loyal to the state of Israel. They're 100% citizens. They're buying. They have no problem here. And what we're seeing is a backlash. The army is trying, I think in many ways, is on a position of damage control because they realize what damage this could do to the army itself. Now, more criticism came from of the bill came from a journalist. You may know the name. The Israelis listening will definitely know the name, and his name is Nachum Barnea. Nachum Barnea is a journalist who I will remember particularly for his coverage during the Rabin assassination. He stood there in what is now Rabin Square with a massively oversized phone reporting the death after the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. Classic piece of journalism on the Israeli side. He wrote a condemning article in Ynet, and I would just want to read you a part of it. Again, the whole article is on my Facebook page, and you can read it for yourself altogether. He called the article "The Most Anti-Israel Law." He wrote, quote, "The nationality law only serves to erode the Israeliness that should be promoted in Israeli society. It is morally, historically, and practically bankrupt, and shows complete disregard for our Druze brothers who carry Israeli IDs and who serve loyally when called upon to defend the nation. There is nothing Israeli about the law." Harsh words. He carries on, he says, "It is outrageous in every single respect, morally, historically, and practically. The reality in Israel was far from being perfect, even before the ratification of the law, but there is a difference between complex reality and being open to struggle, being open to changes, and a basic law that is supposed to be a central element in the Constitution. The tribe has spoken. It's tired of being responsible for the state. It wants to return to tribal laws." Harsh words by Nachum Barnea. What I would argue, and I think to pick up on that last point, I think there's an interesting point here for discussion, which I throw out to you, my dear podcast followers, wherever you are. Be interested to know where you listen to these podcasts, by the way. Are you driving? Are you in the gym? Are you in the shower? Where are you? Let me know. Has Israel now accepted, as in other countries, populism? In other words, the rise of Trump was not started in the United States, a sense of ethnicity, a sense of even ethnicity with xenophobia, swept Europe beforehand. Have we today, the people of the book, come back to becoming a tribe which is perhaps very suspicious of anyone else in the area, even when they do hold out their hands in friendship? It's a thought. Maybe populism has also arrived in Israel in the same form that we're seeing in Europe and elsewhere. Anyway, interesting thoughts, interesting discussions. I've always said in my seminars, understanding is not agreeing. I'm throwing out many ideas here. I'm fascinated to hear what you think, and you are invited to be in contact. Many different ways. You can contact me on Awesome Seminars on Twitter, which is the best way. You can also contact me via my website, Awesome Seminars, and also you can be on my Facebook page. Look up Neil Lazarus at Awesome Seminars there. It's Facebook/Israel4, as in the number 4, me. So those are different ways you can be in contact. Also, remember, we have now an app, the Neil Lazarus app you can download. Lots of information, updating itself 24/7. That's all free, without any advertisements. Yay! I don't like advertisements on apps. They remind me, I don't know, it's just annoying. So this whole app is created for your information and your information only. That's what I think education is all about. Finally, I am planning my next tour. So if you're interested in having some more thoughts, political analysis and political discussion, also talking about how to overcome some of the sort of real wacky criticism of Israel, which is out there, especially on campuses, I'm happy to come and speak to you live or to do a podcast. What I've tried to show here is very much reflect, and I tried to reflect, is the discussions that are really going on in Israel. I'm not at that level where, everything that Israel does is good, everything the Arabs do is bad, or vice versa, is to realize and to explore some of the real challenges, real dilemmas in the state of Israel as it exists today. For those of you who've heard me, I am very critical also of the wacky left who have little protests on free trips to Israel and then decide to leave. They decided to leave beforehand, that ilk of people. I'm also critical of people who Israel could do absolutely no wrong, everything's wonderful. Again, let's have a look and build a real relationship with Israel based on an understanding of the dilemmas that face the country. For every decision you make, there's a price to pay. The question for all of us is what price we're willing to pay.
You're listening to Middle East expert and keynote speaker Neil Lazarus, live from Jerusalem.